Joining us from Princeton, New Jersey, is the former U.S. ambassador to Israel and Egypt, Daniel Kurtzer. Ambassador Kurtzer, we've just come out of the Temple Mount crisis. Ahead of us, the UN General Assembly, when often the Palestinians make a diplomatic push. Is there some pressure now on the Trump administration to advance at least somewhat the peace process?
Well, there certainly are higher stakes now. We've had 7 or 8 months of the administration's initial efforts. Jason Greenblatt, the envoy, has been largely in a listening mode. And I think there's some frustration on the Palestinian side that the United States has not said the words two-state solution and has not been clear. There may be some frustration on the Israeli side that some of the expectations with regard to American policy on the American embassy in Jerusalem have not reached fruition. So we're, I think, beyond the maneuvering point, and I think the expectations have been raised, both as a result of these early steps in the process, but also, as you indicated, the situation in the region and after the Jerusalem contretemps.
Well, as you mentioned, that President Abbas says in private, he is being told that the U.S., the Trump administration, supports the two-state solution. Is that something they now need to say publicly to, in a sense, move the ball along?
Well, for the Palestinians, I think it's a major requirement. They're concerned that the Trump administration is buying into the idea that there is some alternative outcome short of a state, which the administration may buy into. And so for the Palestinians, this is going to be a rather significant requirement to hear it not only in private, but for the administration to say it publicly. I think to the extent that they can do that, it will meet the Palestinian demand, but it may complicate the matter for Prime Minister Netanyahu with those in his coalition who do not favor that outcome.
As you mentioned, Ambassador Kurtzer, the U.S. has been more in, as you say, a listening mode for the past 6 to 8 months. Is it now time for a more dramatic gesture, calling a summit meeting, perhaps of some kind, be it in Washington or something more regionally?
Well, I am always a bit skeptical of dramatic moves unless they've been very well prepared. There certainly has come the time for an American strategy and an American policy. I think if Kushner, Greenblatt, and Powell start to lay this out in private, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to have some big event at this moment. Certainly at some point you want to launch the process, but what's really needed now is a policy, and the administration has not yet seemingly articulated such a policy. After it has decided a policy, it can choose to have a launching event. It can choose to upgrade the envoy. It might do some kind of a summit meeting. But those are tactical outcomes after you've made your policy choices.
Ambassador Kurtzer, you know the situation in Israel, including the internal politics and the issues facing Prime Minister Netanyahu. Does he have any room to maneuver here on the Palestinian issue?
Well, I think as far as the Prime Minister is concerned, the visit of the U.S. envoys should take on a different character. Concerns about the agreement in southern Syria that was reached between the United States and Russia, concerns about the future of the Iran Joint Comprehensive Plan of Action on the nuclear issue, concerns about stability in neighboring countries. And so the Prime Minister, I think, has a valid argument to make that before he can decide whether to think about concessions or taking risks in the peace process, I think he wants to be more certain about the direction of American policy. In terms of his own maneuverability, you know, it's been 50 years since the Six-Day War, and Israel's policy with respect to the future of these territories is still not clear. And so Prime Minister, I think, does owe it to the Israeli people to say whether or not he supports a two-state outcome and whether he's prepared to move in that direction.
Okay, Ambassador Daniel Kurtzer, thank you for joining us on The Rundown.